are Geeks Not Nerds. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
Vince, today's topic is propelled by our Dredd review from last week. And what we're going to talk about today is remakes and movies that are sort of remakes and sort of aren't. We're going to try to define a distinction today. What we're going to be talking about are movies that are called the same thing or based on the same thing that another movie was, but is not actually a remake or should not be considered a remake, and the fundamental problems and, I don't know, maybe sometimes benefits, but I sort of doubt it, that, well, actually there are a few. We'll get into that. That can come from calling something a remake that really has nothing to do with that other thing, but is just based on the same source material. So, 10 minutes on the clock. And, Vince, I wanted to talk about this from doing the Dredd review, because I think Dredd really suffered from this. The way that, not the movie, because we liked the movie.
Yeah. Well, Dredd, meaning the amount of money that it made, how many people went to see it.
Right.
So, no, please complete your thought. I was just being goofy.
The performance of that movie suffered because people remembered the 95 film, that, or whichever year that, I think it was 95, that Stallone made that didn't do well and people hated. And they were like, oh, why would you remake that movie? It's not really a remake, is the thing. It's an entirely different thing. It's based on the same source material. But it's not a remake of that film. It's an entirely different story. The only thing that they looked to from that film was what not to do, you know? And so,
you guys want to get Rob Schneider? Rob Schneider? Oh, Bill wants Rob Schneider. We're not doing it.
So I kind of wanted to kind of, you know, use that as a jumping point and talk about some other things. This sort of thing happens all the time, right? We got this new Oz movie coming out, and I remember, and who's directing that? Is that
I know it's a Sam Raimi movie, but I don't know if he's the director or the producer.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway,
he might be the director.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it. I knew Raimi was involved. Whatever. But anyway, so you got this Oz movie coming out, and I remember when I first saw a preview for that, people sitting around me going, "Oh, why would you remake Wizard of Oz?" Even after they saw the title, it's not Wizard of Oz, it's not a remake. It's not even based on the same story. It's just in that. But these kind of, but titles, you know, connected to other things that we remember, certainly influence people's perceptions of them.
Mm-hmm. You know, The Great and Powerful Oz is a remake, or is equal to the Oz myth. At the same time as the Johnny Depp Alice in Wonderland is the same thing as Alice in Wonderland. They're two very different things. They have very different stories. They're trying to achieve different things. You can't say that they're the same movie, that they're remaking it, especially if it's either continuing the story or happening before the story. It's not a remake, it's a continuation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Oz and Alice in Wonderland are slightly different, just because there really were a lot of Oz books. I mean, like, Baum did a lot of Oz books, and you go to Alice in Wonderland, and I don't believe there was a series of Alice in Wonderland books. Perhaps there was, but
I don't
obviously, but nothing like Oz. I mean, Oz had a bunch of books, and honestly, a lot of people have been wondering for a while why more of them haven't been adapted to major motion pictures, because there are a lot of them, and people like more than just the original Wizard of Oz. So
I was only aware of the Wizard of Oz because I remember reading the Wizard of Oz and thinking, wow, this guy's never been to Kansas.
Yeah. Well, I thought maybe you didn't know that, and that's why I wanted to mention it to you.
Yeah, I had no idea.
No, Wizard of Oz is a whole series. I mean, the Oz books, it's an entire series of things. So the difference there is this is an adaptation of another Oz story, as far as I know. You see what I'm saying? Whereas when you go to Alice in Wonderland, that's like kind of a new story based on that old story a little bit, and kind of feeling a little bit sequel-y. Not really a sequel to another thing on screen, just sort of to that story. You know what I mean? It's a little bit sort of like Hook was with Peter Pan. You know,
yeah,
where
that's a good example.
Hook was kind of a sequel to a movie that was never made. You know, it was just sort of here's a sequel to that story, but not that thing. Anyway, that has jack to do with what we're talking about. But So, does that? Let me ask you this: does that mess with your perceptions? Like, when do you find yourself going? Yeah, it's just another movie based on that source material, and do you ever look at it and go, it's a sequel? Yeah, it's a remake.
Sometimes I get a little bogged down trying to figure out if it's a remake. Like when the Wolfman first came out, I couldn't decide whether it was a remake. I thought it was, but people told me it wasn't, or that it was a separate thing. And it turns out it was indeed a remake. Same character names, same overall plot until you get to about the second act.
But did Wolfman have source material? That was just a film, right?
I think it was just a film. I think it was the 1940 whatever movie.
So then, by definition, it would be a remake, no matter what they did with it. Definition.
Yeah, exactly. If we can make a quick definition...
Can we please? Because that's really what I wanted this to... Honestly, this has less to do with exploring a topic and more to do with just us saying, hey, there's this thing you should be aware of if you haven't thought about it.
A remake is reinterpretation of a particular source. And I would say within the same medium. So, Wolfman is a movie that's based on a predecessor, which is a movie.
Yeah.
So, Dredd is a movie that's based on the source material that Judge Dredd was based on. So, they're not remakes. One is an interpretation, the other is an interpretation. It's kind of like, I've heard people call these three movies remakes of each other. Last Man on Earth, Omega Man, and I Am Legend. They're not remakes. They're based on the book I Am Legend. So they're three separate things based on the book. And maybe
they can have elements of remake in them if one feels the need to homage another of the same medium. And I've not seen the other two. I've only seen I Am Legend, but I've been told that there are homages to Omega Man in I Am Legend. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this.
I feel like if you're going to make a movie, like if you have a really iconic movie, like for example True Grit, if you have the John Wayne movie is beloved. People really dig that movie. And I've seen both. I can't say that I begrudge either group. Somebody who likes the newer one more or the older one. Now here's the deal. They're both called True Grit. They're both based on the book True Grit. But the characterizations of the main characters in the movie are both movies are significantly different from each other. Now I do feel that you might be able to say that there are scenes that are particularly selected for the more recent movie because they were in the older movie. But I almost feel that is significant because it's showing you how these characters would handle it differently and forging anew, trying to do something different from what the old one did. And I don't think that qualifies it to be a remake. I think that just because of course those scenes are in the book.
Yeah, I don't think this is simple though. I think this is one of those things where there are places where you can make the case that it is still a remake even if it's based on source material. And we got to be kind of careful here because we can get really nitpicky and we can get really fanboyish about this. Here's a really interesting example. I've got two really interesting examples of this. One of them is The Thing and the remake of The Thing, because the remake that was supposed to somehow be kind of a prequel, or I think
I haven't seen it. My problem with that was it looked like the exact same movie, but it was a prequel.
And therein lies my point. Whether that was supposed to be in the same continuity or not, even if they had said that it wasn't, that's not a case where it's another movie based on the same source material. That's a case where it's another movie based on a movie, even though that has source material. So those movies are originally based on a 1950s science fiction novella called Who Goes There? I've read it. It actually has another earlier movie called, I think it has the word thing in the title, but it's not, or is it also called The Thing? I forget, anyway.
Thing from Another Planet?
No, that's a different thing.
It's a different planet. Different planet.
That's an entirely different movie. But anyway, my point is that the new The Thing is not based on Who Goes There. It's based on The Thing, even though they originally had source material. Here's another example. 101 Dalmatians. 101 Dalmatians is a Disney film based on a book. The live-action version, made by Disney, clearly a live-action adaptation of their film, not necessarily the book. the Cruella de Vil song is in it. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that it's kind of interesting. There are kind of some different distinctions where sometimes it's kind of both. Sometimes it's one or the other. But I do think that there are a lot of these cases where it can kind of hurt the movie a little bit. Where what they're doing is they're trying to go back to the source material and making a new version, not making that other movie again. With Dredd, I think it hurt it. I think with other things it can help it, though. I think that brand recognition is kind of a big deal, and so people might go see something just because they've heard of it, and maybe even if they weren't trying to make a remake, it can help it because people think it's a remake, and then they get something entirely different, and then they want to go see it again, or tell all their friends to go.
Which is kind of a catch, and that bothers me a bit, because if you're going to remake a movie, wouldn't you want to remake a movie that's not that great? Wouldn't you want to say, let's take a second shot at this and see if we can do it better? As opposed to saying, well, that movie did really well, people will go see a remake of that movie, and then they make a piece of crap that's now floating around in the aether.
Well, and that's almost an entirely different topic in and of itself, right? I mean,
yeah.
What you end up with is the what I like to call the Hollywood Catch-22, which is great movies ought to sell, but name and brand recognition sell better. The problem with just remaking movies that were bad is that if they were bad and they bombed, then the brand recognition is not going to help people go see them again because they didn't go the first time, necessarily. So I guess sometimes that could work, but you're still taking a risk either way you go.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that judgment...
I mean, in a perfect world, if all we were doing was trying to make good movies, then yes, of course. A remake should be about trying to do it again better, because maybe there was a good premise there, but the execution wasn't good.
Like, for example, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
What is the point of making another one of those?
Yeah, I mean, you have a movie that's terrific, largely accepted by most people who watch it, except for, it's part of film canon, it's part of our pop culture.
It's on top 10 science fiction films of all time lists all the time.
And it's
sometimes
highly...
tops it.
Yeah, it's highly influential. It's one of those movies that gets referenced pretty often. There are people who love the Evil Dead series, and they get to Army of Darkness, and Ash has to say Klaatu Barada Nikto, and he can't remember it. But, well, that's a reference to The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Right.
And that's kind of what's interesting. Maybe that even has a little bit of a reference to pop culture, how people tend to forget the predecessors or the significance of the predecessors.
Yeah, well, and isn't it ironic? And I don't know that I don't even remember if you saw it. Did you see the remake of Day the Earth Stood Still? I know you told me.
I refused.
Yeah. Well, for good reason. It was awful. But one of my big problems with it, well, the whole thing was awful. But one of the things that I immediately cried foul was that catchphrase isn't in the film anywhere. It's not even in it. They didn't use it. That's one of the big things in that movie, that they didn't use it. I think the people, and I was going to make the point that sometimes you can remake something that was good if you have kind of another spin that you can put on it. Where it's not trying to outdo that other movie, it's making what ends up being a different movie with a similar premise. And then you have to decide if it's okay to just sell things on name recognition, because that's usually what will happen with that. But I think the people who did the remake of the Day the Earth Stood Still would try to say that it was okay. I mean that it was a good idea because they had a different message to sell with the same premise because they made it an environmental thing. But it didn't work. Like I could buy that if it was good, but it didn't work.
Could you say that the remake of Day the Earth Stood Still was largely spectacle? Because I haven't seen it, so. Yeah,
but also preachy in a bad way. I mean, like the other one kind of had a preachy element to it at the end too, but this one was but it was really cynical. I mean, like the Day the Earth Stood Still. I don't really recall thinking was really cynical. Well, in fact, it wasn't. I mean, like it was. Like the point was this alien trying to get mankind to save itself. If I'm remembering it right,
yeah.
This one was a lot more cynical than that. But
yeah, I feel like that's just indicative of our more distrusting times. People are more.
I think so too. Yeah.
More ready to accept something that's less enlightened or less. People are more willing to accept that humanity is less enlightened.
Yeah, well, and hopefully this isn't too much of a political statement, but I feel like some of the time when you make movies that are about an environmental message versus like what we had with the original Day the Earth Stood Still, which was about let's not blow each other up with nukes. The big difference with that is that like whether or not we should, the United States and other countries should have nuclear warfare was kind of a big topic of debate at the time. What we have now with the environmental thing is very much more often like the little people versus big corporations that people feel like they're kind of dragging down the environment with their factories and all those sorts of things. I feel like most of the time when you're doing environment, you're preaching to the choir. Like, who's going to go into a movie that's telling you not to mess up the environment and go, I disagree. I think messing up the environment is fine. Like, I don't care where your politics are. I think most people would say, yes, that's bad. You see what I'm saying? So so my point is, when you're making a big environmental message, when you're trying to tell the audience, how dare you mess up the environment, I feel like much more often it's more about punishing the people that are doing that more than it is about like changing my mind about something I think. You see what I'm saying?
Maybe that's just an approach that we have to that we, meaning the entirety of pop culture, has to social commentary nowadays.
Yeah.
If you make social commentary, maybe they say it is too risky to make a movie that is about something controversial. If it takes a stance, like for example, as you just said, you cannot say that the environmental is bad. Well, I mean, I could say that I saw a seal with its head in a Pringles can, and man, did I laugh.
Yeah, but everybody would lynch you if you did that. I mean, because it's wrong, and everybody knows that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Now, look, I'm not saying that I've never seen something that had somewhat of an environment. I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble. I'm not saying that I've ever seen something with like an environmental message where it didn't mean something to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that we can't all do better about those sorts of things and that there isn't something to say to us. It just seems like a lot of the time it feels too much like an agenda. You know what I mean? Like it's not really about trying to make me and Vince like think differently about an issue. But honestly, that's the reason that movie didn't work. It wasn't because it was environmental. It was because of the approach that they took.
Yeah, I mean, like for example,
it was too preachy. It
the
was
original concept of Watchmen.
I know this. Yeah. I get this message.
That's crazy.
What's that?
The original thing that, or not the original, but the thing that they were going to do before Zack Snyder took over.
Yeah.
Which, regardless of whether or not I like Zack Snyder, thank God somebody stepped in and said, please don't do that.
Yeah.
So, let's set it all in the Middle East, and we'll just have a big, most people agree that we shouldn't be there, and shouldn't have been there when the movie would have come out.
Yeah.
So.
But I'm just saying, exactly. Take a bit of a risk. Take a little bit of a stand on something. Don't just like put. Because what I don't like is when I hope this video itself is not too preachy. What I feel like happens a lot of the time is movies like this get put out, and they tell you and they make a big message like this where they're kind of preaching to most people that would agree with them, like we're saying. You know what I mean? Most of us are going to go, well, yeah, I agree with that. And then they try to act like it's controversial. Mm-hmm. That was my big problem with Avatar. That's why I don't like Avatar. Because I feel like, because a lot of the interviews I saw with people who made that movie were acting like it was a big controversial message. And I'm like, no, I can't think of a single person that wouldn't agree with what you're saying. That's why I didn't really enjoy it. Like, I was like, yeah, okay, I get that,
There's a Patton Oswalt joke in a stand-up routine that I think
it would be like if your whole movie was just don't do drugs, kids. Like, okay.
And they make
You're right.
Movies. They're called after-school specials.
You're right. Kids shouldn't take drugs. All right. What? You make a story out of it. Give me a character that I care about. That's my point.
Patton Oswalt says, or he makes some joke, and then everybody cheers, and he says, yeah, I'm going out on a limb. I don't care who I offend in this room full of people that I emailed. It's a really funny thought to me. Now, I asked you the spectacle thing earlier, and I think I have a good example of that, which is Dawn of the Dead, the original Romero movie, which had lots of character arcs and lots of good stuff in it, and then you get the remake of Dawn of the Dead, which really only has the fact that it's set in a mall. in common.
You talked about this one a lot.
And the problem with that is that it's not a good remake. There's no character arc. There's no characterization. It's archetypes living out a zombie apocalypse in a mall. Whereas in the original movie, flawed though it may be with some of its concepts of the human psyche, still has character arcs. Still has people making decisions that can affect their lives rather than just trying to survive. So I think that's a good example of what was it? You said it earlier, which was a remake that only has a little bit in common, and they're trying to sell it on name recognition.
Oh yeah, sure.
So of course, people see Romero or Dawn of the Dead, and they go, "Well, let's go see that." It's that Of the Dead guy.
Well, and of course, our big we've talked about remakes a lot before, and our big example for that's always the Karate Kid, where like the remake isn't even the Karate Kid at this point; it's the Kung Fu Kid. And I heard it was actually kind of a decent movie, but the thing is, it's an entirely different thing with the same name in it. Well, it's not entirely different. I mean, I guess it basically has the same the same basic story arc, but it's Kung Fu. And it's, the characters are kind of different.
At least he was a kid. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if it was called The Karate Kid, but he was like 25?
Yeah, you see, I think eventually they're going to have the Taekwondo teenager and the Aikido infant.
But hey, if Power Rangers could get away with 25-year-olds, then I don't know why Karate Kid couldn't. Well, anyway. Hey, everybody, thanks a lot for watching Geeks Not Nerds. I feel like this episode kind of derailed a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it went somewhere interesting, even if it wasn't on topic.
And I really apologize if anybody feels like I got too much on my soapbox. That's something that always bugs me. The whole thing where we're just kind of preaching to the choir, and I'm like, yeah, but give me substance, like. I don't know, that kind of thing bugs me. And, anyway...
I don't care who I offend in this room full of subscribers!
Yeah, well, anyway. Hey, leave your comments, tell us what you think, and, I'm sure we'll have some interesting comments on this one. And, also, if there's anything you'd like us to talk about in a future video, leave that in the comments as well. Thanks as always for watching, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince, reminding you to support your local comic book store.